All right. Nice, nice. There's an artist. All right, I'm seeing audio show up here now. Yes, great. All right, we'll start again. We are here with Mitch Gerads.
Yeah.
All right, hard G is what I've learned. Um, thanks everyone for tuning in. This is our first of many, hopefully, discussions with various artists at DC. Just in recent years, that the conversation in comics journalism has really focused. Hold on one second. Oof, I'm getting feedback here. Hold on one second. There we go. Perfect. Um, but the focus has really been on the writers, and in many ways, I feel some people have kind of lost the ability to talk to the artists or don't know what to ask of the artists, and so I wanted to kind of maybe add this conversation to the overall conversation, as artists are just as vital and important to the creative process, the writers, in my opinion. So, anyway, so thanks for joining us. Look, I just want to tell you that I am a huge fan of what you're doing on Mr. Miracle, obviously with that up and coming new writer guy or whatever. And what I really was struck by was just the way you took something that was so identified with Jack Kirby and how you really kind of made it your own. And in many ways, I think really made it feel contemporary. So before we get into that, though, actually, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your kind of where you came from. I googled your name, and some obscure indie comic came up, and you started out as a colorist or something. I assume that's the same,
Oh yeah.
Mitch,
So I
right?
mean, if you want to go way back,
Yeah,
my first thing I ever did was I self-published a comic called Johnny Recon with a friend of
that's
mine,
right.
and that was kind of how I broke in for the most part. I did one issue, and it was terrible, but I brought it to shows and got feedback from other pros and stuff, and then I went back and did the second issue, trying to listen to everything they told me, and tried to correct a lot of those things. And the second issue got a little bit of traction, and that led into a coloring gig over at Boom for a while. And right from that, I went over to Image and started doing the activity.
Right.
Yeah.
So then, obviously you work with Tom on Sheriff of Babylon, and there you started working with him on essentially a 9-panel, like a lot of 9-panel grid pages. You start coloring your own work, or you've always kind of penciled and inked and colored your own work, or
Yeah. Yep. It's I always like to say it's a control issue, which
right,
it pretty much is, but no, there's just something magical about controlling all aspects of it. And then also coloring is my favorite part, so that's where I get the most enjoyment. So to give that away would kind of devalue the other parts for me.
right. So when I look at your stuff, I see, and a lot of artists actually kind of bristle at when their work is compared to another artist. Other artists kind of embrace it and like talking about different things. But to me, I got a really huge Bill Sienkiewicz, Electra Assassin vibe from it. Just because
Hey,
the way you use color, sometimes you will model things and render it, and then other times you will just do like the outline of a cape, I would say, and just fill it with flat color, and it becomes a very graphical kind of shape on the panel itself. Is
yeah,
it
so part of my approach for Mr. Miracle was, like Tom and I have said in many interviews, I think the downfall of maybe why a lot of Kirby-inspired books haven't sold super well or done really well in the past is that everyone tries to do Kirby, how Kirby did it, and nobody can do that.
right?
Jack Kirby is, I mean, you can try to copy it, but your mind is going to see a copy right away. You just can't do Kirby. So my thought is, going into this, I wanted to do something inspired by everything Kirby brought to the table and everything, but I kind of wanted to lean almost in the exact opposite direction as a way of paying tribute to Kirby. So I kind of looked at a lot of art that was coming out during Kirby's time, like the 60s and 70s, a lot of magazine commercial illustration, guys like L. Parker and Austin Briggs and McGinnis and people like that. And that's kind of the path I took with the book. And it's been a lot of fun because I've been into that kind of art my whole life. So to be able to push it into my comic work has been great.
Right. Well, I feel the same way you do about the Fourth World. It was something that was amazing to look at, but it was hard to kind of find something to connect with artistically, I guess. And the one that always killed me was Granny Goodness. It was a character like, how can I possibly make this character look cool and interesting?
Yeah.
And in the second issue, you did it. And like, was it like, talk to me a little bit about this challenge you took on of contemporizing or making the Fourth World really look very stylistically yours versus Jack Kirby, and how you approach each of the characters you did. Obviously, Oberon, you have Metron in the second issue, and then, like I said, Granny Goodness. So,
yeah. So a lot of one of the fun approaches to the book has been, since I was a kid, when I look at a comic, for some reason my mind instantly doesn't necessarily cast all the parts, but like I see actors and I see people, whether they be famous actors, famous people, or my neighbor down the street. Mm-hmm. And so in my head, I remember reading Mr. Miracle at a very young age, and Oberon was always Danny DeVito to me.
Got it.
And Granny Goodness was Kathy Bates or Ed Asner all in one.
All right. Okay, that's cool.
So I kind of do that with a lot of characters, and especially those two within Mr. Miracle. I really patterned that way, and it's not even just looks. It's just the way some of these actors carry themselves.
Right.
I find that really fun challenge to bring into the work, and do my best to not make it completely obvious, because then you're just doing that. But it's Mr. Miracle's been a weird, really awesome book for me, because whether it be from editorial or just out of my own brain or what, but I really went in with a clean slate and figured I could do whatever I want. And Jamie Rich, our editor, hasn't stopped me yet. So
sure. Well, did you and Tom King, who's obviously the writer of this, amazing writer, did you guys talk beforehand about how you wanted to approach the Fourth World visually? I mean, aside from making it your own, I mean, the characters are very relatable, in my opinion, which I think was always another kind of obstacle for me to really embrace it when I was a kid. But the way you draw the figures, I mean, when you have Scott Free walking along the beach with High Father, and he's like kicking the water like a little kid and throwing stones, is kind of bored and just being a little kid again. It really humanized him, and also High Father. I mean, he became like the father that we all kind of had, kind of distracted and kind of worrying about things and making excuses for not being there. Where did that all come from, or walk me through that too?
That scene especially comes from my love of Norman Rockwell, who's my absolute favorite artist. And even if you don't see the influence in my work, it's the fact that whatever that guy painted or whatever he drew, you got a whole story in one image.
Right,
and so all these emotions of every character. And so, in the script, I think Scott's just talking to High Father, and then there's dialogue and stuff. But I was like, all right, well, I got to put what I do too with my art is I act out every part like an idiot in front of my webcam. And
all right.
So I just sit there and kind of put my head in the space of the character, and he's kind of bored and kind of trying not to pay attention while paying attention, and like a little kid just kicking the water. And
Well, was that a conversation you had early on with Tom, or was the script say, hey,
Yeah, what's kind of funny about that is we didn't have a lot of conversations about visuals, only because neither of us knew what it was going to be like. Because as an artist, I'm very much connected to reality, and I've always done books that kind of take place in our world,
right?
To a very literal extent.
Sure.
A lot of military books, and Sheriff of Babylon was a fictional story that could have been a true story. Every place was real. So we just didn't know what taking Jack Kirby's crazy world and characters into my art would be like. So I kind of just went in blank slate, and Tom just kind of went in for the ride.
Right. But you stay true, I think, to the designs. Even the mother box, you're not using like the updated New 52 kind of Rubik's Cube one. It's more like a cell phone or a smartphone or whatever. I mean, you guys really kind of updated.
That was exactly my thought, is that reading through Mr. Miracle and New Gods and stuff, the Kirby stuff, that mother box very much was a prediction, I think, for smartphones. And so that's kind of how I wanted it to feel. They use it for everything. They talk to it like it's, Siri or something.
Right.
Yeah, just kind of, I like to take different literal things, weave it into this crazy Jack Kirby world.
Right. Oh, well, look, I think you did an astonishing job of making. You kept the sort of fantasy and the alien aspect of the fourth world, but made it very relatable. And I think that I think was sort of the missing ingredient for me, and probably for a lot of other fans. Like, you read it, and it's like you had these incredible visuals, but it was hard to relate to. And the fact that you see yourself in these characters so easily makes all the difference. I mean, the fact that when was it Big Barda and Scott, right before they take the boom tube leave, they go like, what about the cats or something like that? I was just like,
Which, little factoid, that was my cat. So
okay, got it. So do you shoot a lot of? So you say you use a webcam a lot you use yourself for Big Barda. I mean, what is? I mean, I use myself. Because I draw late at night, I use myself for reference for every figure. You just kind of exaggerate or remove the facial hair or whatever. So
I just got a little, tripod stand for my cell phone and got an app for a timed shots. And I just sit here and act out all the scenes, half for just acting cues to see how people react in situations, and then half for literal, how does a fold work? How does an arm move?
Right.
But yeah, it's a lot of them get very in depth. A lot of made costumes and stand-ins and things.
Really?
So it's usually me for that same reason, because I'm home alone by myself,
right,
doing all these things. But a lot of the times, like my wife, Sophia, in Sheriff of Babylon, my wife stood in for almost all of those shots. Like, cut her up, and yeah.
So then, do you take all your photo reference and lay it out in the composition of the page, and then walk me through? I assume it's all digital, right?
Yeah,
although I see Zipatone, so I don't know if that's hand
all
applied
digital
or
now, thanks to those Kyle Webster brushes. That guy puts out really good stuff. But yeah, I'm all digital. I completely lost track of where I'm going. Oh yeah, so my process. It's different. Online I'll call it pencils, inks, and colors, just because that's what people are used to. But I don't really have a penciling stage. I never rough sketch out a thing besides really terrible thumbnails on the side of a script. But what I do is I shoot all this photo reference, and then I kind of augment it and draw a new line here and there in Photoshop. And then I compile that almost as like a photo collage. And then I turn that blue line. And then at that point, I ink over the top. So all my actual drawing is happening in the ink stages.
Got it. So you blue line the photo reference? Is that what you
Yeah.
So do you blow it out so that you just get outlines and stuff like that?
Yeah, I'll do there's one of the built-in Photoshop filters is poster edges.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So I'll turn it black and white poster edges to kind of knock out, and then use layers to bring it to a crisp black and white, so I can see the important lines. Because that's the other thing that's nice about that is it'll show you the important lines in Photoshop rather than drawing every little thing.
Right. But then stuff like the parademons or creatures. Are you saying that you have some cosplay stuff at home that you pull out, or
I'll do a lot of crazy stuff where I'll act out the parademon, and then I will sit there and take an arm and make that bigger, and dig a head and make it smaller. And
right, yeah.
I'll mutate me into now I'm a shape of a parademon.
Right. So you'll take the photo reference and apply filters or was it free transform or whatever to kind of
liquefy,
push and pull.
Yeah.
Right. Liquefy, even easier. Right. Very cool. Yeah. I had an idea of doing a project like that once. I was going to take editor Ben Abernathy, and because he kind of had the build for Deathblow, I was going to just dress him up in fatigues, because the hardest part is, doing the folds and making it look real, right? That's a big part of it. I was just going to have him.
All I did for a while was military.
Yeah. And I figured it'd be so much easier if he was holding these prop guns and to be in fatigues and to just shoot tons of reference, and then back then there was just a Xerox machine, or maybe there were computers, but blow it out, and then kind of ink over that. But so that so does that allows you to work fairly quickly, I guess, as well?
I think so, which is necessary when you're trying to do monthly books,
Right.
pencils, inks, and colors.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think especially once I switched to all digital, that really sped me up. I was just thinking about this today, where before I went all digital, so I've got the paper and the pens and the ink and everything in front of me, and I was very clean. But once I went digital, I got really messy, and I don't know why that. It's like the opposite.
Right. Maybe to prevent it from looking looking sterile, which I think a lot of digital art can look, is that everything's precise and it doesn't have the random chaotic element in
and
it.
I think you can get a little more brave with trying things out because you can always undo.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely see stuff that, okay, that definitely is best done digitally, but then other stuff with especially the zipatone effects, and you even have like the moire patterns and stuff. I thought like, oh, that looks very like 80s art, like 1980s art to me. So
he did a video tape effect and a Scotch tape effect.
So someone online is asking how you do the tape effect, the videotape effect, and the Scotch tape effect. But
So the Scotch tape effect, that's literally Scotch tape, just scanned in and.
Oh, okay.
That's
cool.
The top.
Wait. So you scan in Scotch tape and then you just import it and paste it in?
So what I did actually is I put a bunch of Scotch tape on a sheet of not quite white construction paper, a little bit off white.
Yeah.
And then I live in Arizona, so I left it out in the sun for like a week. And it just got all that cool old yellow and browns and stuff. And then I just scanned that in. You can kind of take it out and
that's cool.
It in. Yeah,
very craftsy.
I put a few things like the big double page spread in Batman 14 with Batman and Catwoman kissing.
Yeah.
So I'm all digital, but some things you can't do digital because you start to see the pattern and the repetition.
Right.
And so that big giant star field. So the old trick. I just went out in my backyard with a toothbrush and some ink and squirted up a sheet of construction paper and then scanned that in and turned it all white.
Right. No, that's cool. I think I did something similar with when I did the Mastermen with Grant Morrison. There's a scene where it's a thing in perspective with a bunch of sort of ceiling tile elements, and I could, I guess, frisk it off all the areas and then apply ink and then splatter white out and like. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it on a separate board, and then just scan it in and have the colorist drop it in or whatever.
Yeah.
But
that's kind of also the other struggle of one of the reasons I like digital versus traditional is that, or actually not even digital traditional. Why I like penciling, inking, and coloring my own stuff is because I know. So if I've got a night scene, I don't actually have to draw the black background with the stars because I know I can just drop that in color.
Right.
Whereas when you're traditional, especially if you're handing it off to an inker, blah blah, you want it to feel finished on your end. You want to have this nice piece of art you just created, so you do go and ink the background and drop in the stars and stuff, which I think makes it incredibly harder for the colorist. But I get why you do it.
Right.
And so doing it all, I kind of get to skip that precious stuff.
Yeah. That also reminds me of, I don't know if you're a fan of Dave McKean's work, but when he did Arkham Asylum, I was just blown away. I want to say I was in high school or just in college or something, right around that time. And then I found out later that he actually had built a rubber Joker mask, and he took Polaroids of it. And so I thought they were these incredible lifelike paintings, but it was actually this rubber grinning Joker mask, and he just took photos of it in different lighting situations, and then would physically paste that in. I mean, his work was very 3D and collage like.
Nick Darrington, the artist who's the Undoom Patrol and the cover artist.
Yeah.
I know he builds a lot of stuff. Like he built Orion's helmet out of like duct tape, and so I keep pressuring him to submit an idea where it's just
Wait. He built Orion's helmet out of duct tape?
out of duct tape. Yeah.
Like those duct tape wallets that you can kids make?
It's awesome.
Right.
I think he's got it all over his Facebook page. But
okay, I haven't seen it.
The mother box too. Yeah.
So it's the helmet is completely made of duct tape. There's no cardboard.
I believe so.
Okay,
yeah.
all right. That's
and it looks pretty good.
And he uses that for photo reference and lighting
yeah.
schemes and stuff. That's cool.
Yeah.
There are 3D printers. I think that would be the
exactly.
next step, right? 3D duct tape to 3D printers.
Yeah.
Anyway, I also have. Look, I want to share with the audience like some of these images here. The one I have to the left of you is. It's just it's really graphic. It just has a side profile of Mr. Miracle. It's mostly yellow and it has kind of bubbles coming off of it.
Yeah, the number 4 cover.
Right, and it looks like it was inspired by like 60s, you know, psychedelic art.
It's a direct riff on Milton Glazer's Bob Dylan poster.
Right. So
it's kind of, as I put it online, it's Jack Kirby by Milton Glaser via Mitch Gerads.
Right. That's funny because people, I think it was Grant Morrison who was convinced that Jack Kirby had taken a lot of drugs in his career to come up with all this imagery, and then was like super disappointed that wasn't the case. But it's cool that you're able to capture that again in a very novel way. And I think all of this, I mean, you talk about how you draw really realistically, but throughout all the art I've seen, you really are mixing a lot of just sort of psychedelic or surreal elements into realism and natural poses and shots, and it kind of plays off this notion of what's really real and what's not real, what's happening in Scott's head, what's you know.
Another theme that readers might catch in on as the series progresses is things are rendered and done a little bit more real, strangely, when it's on New Genesis or Apocalypse. And when it's on Earth, it's usually that's when I get a little more crazy and a little more interpretive.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, then I got this other cover here. It looks like it's an upshot. It looks like it's cover number 2, maybe. It's an upshot of Mr. Miracle, and you see a parademon coming out of kind of a boom tube above him.
Yeah.
It's an amazing shot. So you're saying this is you at like 2 a.m. using a webcam?
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah. And then
I think I had a yardstick in my hand, and yeah.
And then you're doing stuff. It's almost like you're doing stuff that's made to look off register. Is that like a thing that you wanted to do a lot of in this particular?
Yeah, it's so. As I was kind of doing issue 1 and reading the script and stuff from Tom, like I instantly got, that's the great thing about Tom's scripts, is I always instantly get what he's going for. But like I wanted to do something visually to like speed that along or to really cue in the reader. So, you know, part of the book is you never know what's real and what's not. And so I like to drop in every once in a while these little, you know, glitches and stuff, little glitches in the Matrix. Right. And, you know, it's kind of one of those things where you don't know if that means anything. It could just be me wanting to do something cool. I don't know.
Right.
But maybe it doesn't. Maybe it means something. So.
Yeah. Well, there is definitely that act within an act sort of Shakespearean thing going on in this book, because they reference like a cartoon that starred Mr. Miracle in the 80s. So in your mind, you're sort of almost carrying 3 visual narratives, right? Like to make them distinct, right? I mean, there's flashback sequences I realize I see are kind of desaturated in color. You have stuff that's happening in real time that's very realistic, but then has bits of sort of surrealistic flourishes. Then you have stuff, interviews of, you know, him being on a talk show, or a cartoon featuring Mr. Miracle when he was heavily commercialized, I guess, in our reality or in the DC reality. How much of that happens before you start drawing, or do you read it and go sort of make a mental note and just do it on the fly?
Yeah, it's kind of on the fly.
Yeah.
There's been a few times. The thing about the glitches is they're never in the script.
Got it.
Just kind of where where I feel, and I'm working on issue 4 right now. I've got a really cool idea for one of the glitches that I think people are going to really love, but I can't talk about it.
Okay.
But it's going to be cool, and fans of Jack Kirby are really going to kind of click with it.
Interesting.
And but yeah, it's just kind of where I feel things are starting to get weird. Like there's one of the things I love about the book is that there's some genuine scenes that make you uncomfortable, and not because they're gory or there's shock value, but just because they're a little bit too creepy.
Sure. Well, I think the whole Granny Goodness scenes in the second issue, which is out, is it out next?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Next week.
2 weeks, I hear. It really takes this whole notion of what would happen if kids were sent to different worlds or completely different, and you were raised by Granny Goodness, and some of the memories that Scott and Barta bring up are horrific. I mean,
well, that's kind of what I've told people is that, you read Granny Goodness and you get that she was a torturer and stuff, but in the books she's always, they're comic books, and especially like the stuff in the 70s and stuff, you have to play it a certain way, whereas Tom King doesn't think that way. So Tom King's Granny Goodness is messed up.
Yeah. Right.
And so that's kind of like what I'm really excited to get across is this, like, I want people to love Mr. Miracle and enjoy the book, but I also kind of want them to want to take a shower when they're done reading it.
No, I think what I get out of it is that it was not just this equal swap so that there would be peace amongst the between the two worlds, but that it was this horrific experience for Scott and Big Barda, and they're still sort of paying the price for it today. And
and that's kind of one of the other themes we approached, is that traditionally Mr. Miracle and Big Barda, they're very happy, fun characters.
Right.
They've always been played that way, and we're playing it that way too, to a degree, but you kind of wonder, you get into the head of these characters, is the reason he's so flippant and fun and all these things because of trauma, and he's still dealing with it, and that's kind of his outward way of coping. Right.
Is he really trying to cheat or escape from the hardest thing to escape from, which is death, that no one can escape from, or is he severely mentally challenged from his past? So I definitely got that out of it. I mean, the book works on so many different levels. It's just been a lot of fun. Just even looking at the art, I have now a 9-panel grid from the beginning of issue 2, and it looks like it's where Scott Free is sort of General Free at this point. He's sort of leading the charge against Darkseid's minions that are invading New Genesis. So, do you like working on a 9-panel? I guess at this point you must, because you and Tom. It would be very sad. I'd have to blink twice if you needed me to come and rescue from Tom's clutches.
I think Tom lucked out where he found an artist who likes it just as much as he does.
Right.
It plays directly. It's weird that Tom and I found each other, because we have a lot of storytelling sensibilities that really click.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest thing is I think we both look at panels as time progression.
Right.
And so one of my storytelling tricks, or one of the things I like to do, is I maintain, of course I'm saying this on a page that doesn't have this, but we will keep the camera static and let things happen in front of it.
I can switch. So I'll switch to the page where it's Orion's on the throne, and Barda and Scott are in front of him, right?
Yeah, and so the camera just stays static, and
actually this
people move within it. So you kind of get time progression, because now you're not rushed. You're not the camera's not moving everywhere. You also get the sense of that you're the viewer and you're right there, because you're not moving. You're just seeing things happen.
Right.
And so. And then it's kind of that same idea of, taking things from old newspaper cartoons, Garfield, etc. The 3 panels, the joke, plays across all 3. And I think that's a really fun thing to do in comics, and the 9-panel grid lends itself perfectly to it.
Definitely. I mean, it definitely gives you the sense of passage of time. It feels filmic. You can see there's like a 9-page where you see Granny Goodness, and she's reacting to the arrival of Scott and Big Barda via Boomtube, right? And it's all done through an expression, very slight changes in her expression, and to the final kind of, like, hi, welcome, and you know that there's a lot more behind it because you saw her face just prior to their arrival, and you do it through expression and color, just really, really well done. And again, like, she feels very real to me in ways that the original just seemed like, how does this character fit into the DC universe? And it now kind of works for me because they're like these horrific people that imprison people in their homes or in the middle of the woods, in the middle of nowhere for years on end. I mean, it's on that level. So here's another page, another 9-panel page. It is Barda and Scott, and they're lying in bed back to back with the rival Metron, and he's kind of warning them, like, don't look at the face of God kind of thing. But a lot of this book seems to happen in bed with Scott and Barda just kind of lying there. Is that something that, I mean, do you care? I mean, does all art service the story, or are there times where you go, like, I want to do this really amazing?
No, I think I love those bed scenes, and they happen at least once an issue.
Yeah.
Only because one of the things Tom and I talked about when we started the book is that, like, Barda and Scott are, like, the only characters we could think of that are, like, happily married, functional characters. Where traditionally in comics, everyone's, angry that they can't go on a date. Like, that's the thing. And these are two people who are married, they work as a team, and they have a family life. They've got the cats to take care of, etc. So that really interested us, of playing that suburban family life marriage versus the crazy apocalypse, crazy new Genesis for the world. And so the bed scenes are this great time when we can bring it all back, and this page is kind of a melding of the two, which plays with the humor of it. But yeah, the bed scenes, and there's a lot of kitchen scenes and things that kind of root the reader and root the characters back to normalcy before it gets crazy, which only emphasizes the crazy.
Right, for sure. No, you're right. I mean, it's not just your sort of natural take on forms and poses, but it's the sort of domestic moments that you never see in comic books, kind of brought to life, and but even then you're applying kind of these graphics and just cool elements, and so visually I find it really fun to look at, and I think it's really hard to draw people lying there in bed in general. I would rather draw people like smashing each other across rooftops, than try to.
The quiet moments are the hardest to draw.
For sure, absolutely, and I always take photo reference for that stuff. I hear that Tom is also online watching us, so we have to be careful what we say.
Yeah.
And Nick as well. So we love duct tape creations. We should have something. We should have a picture to show up. So here's another. So here's 9 pages. This is a shot of Barda and Scott. They're about to go in a boom tube. You kind of repeat that kind of imagery. To me, there's also when you do the 9-panel grid and also the way you repeat certain images, it has a very kind of musical vibe to me. Are you into music? I mean, I feel like you're hitting certain notes, and this is a bass line, and this is whatever musical term that kind of talks about how to.
So when I think of storytelling, my brain just automatically clicks to film, and TV, and movies.
Right.
And so, soundtracks and music cues and things like that are huge to me. So while doing Mr. Miracle, I mean, the first two pages we've seen of issue 2, where he's General Free and he's just battling across Apocalypse like crazy. Like, I couldn't do those and not think that I was in like a 70s laser light show, and Zeppelin Immigrant Song is playing.
Right.
Yeah, and so a lot of things just have these cool music cues for me, and the shot there, I repeat that a lot. So whenever I try to, at least anytime they're going into a boom tube and they're having their conversation, I kind of repeat that same page or that motif, change the location, obviously, because they're in a new place. But anything I can do, I think, to make the readers feel comfortable and familiar, like they know this, it helps to ground them right before we do something crazy to them.
Right.
So right before you go to Apocalypse, and who knows what's going to happen, we get this nice comfortable shot, this nice page that people are familiar with.
Right.
Calms them down a little, and then you can shock them.
Sure, yeah, and they're also, like you said, they're so matter of fact about it, and the mother box is saying boom tube will open in 0.4 seconds, and it's all, it just, like, to us it's fantastical, but to them it's like this is the world that they grew up in.
And I think one of the great things too about this book in particular, in reference to the fourth world, is that Scott Free, I think, is the best way in for a reader, because he's the only new god that doesn't really care that he's a god.
Right. And
so I think people can automatically kind of emphasize or empathize with him a little bit more.
Right. So, I'm now showing the double page spread from the first issue where we see that Scott Free has either decided to challenge death or has become that his past has caught up with him and he's decided to kind of end his life. And it's got like kind of this 70s meet Mr. Miracle. And so do you think about the typography and the lettering and stuff like that? Do you give notes to Clayton? How does that work?
So a little bit, kind of halfway, like I come from a graphic design background, and so I'm very picky about typography.
Right.
And luckily Clayton is awesome, but we do bring him through his paces. We'll get notes back and I'll change a lot of things here and there, but he's really like getting it. I think we went through one issue of like, oh, we kind of want to do this instead. And ever since then, like, he turns in something and you're like, he gets it. He's on board.
Well, you guys are you're pretty sparse with the sound effects, the booms, and most of the time it's unaccompanied by a sound effect. Even when I think Scott and Bart are walking through a camp, there's like sound effects, but there's also a dotted dashed line, almost like a map, like it's a map, a treasure map kind of effect.
It was my super serious moment told as a family circus.
Right. That's right. Okay. So you keep you reference Sunday Comics a lot. Are you a huge fan of that? It's just
that's what I grew up reading as a kid, and so I think a lot of that. I feel like the storytelling in those was very clear,
right?
And that's kind of something I want to bring into comics, because sometimes you read a comic and it's beautiful, but maybe the storytelling from panel to panel isn't super clear. Mm-hmm. And I really like to, nice, clean way from panel to panel, which is another reason the 9-panel grid is great, because you're reading right to left.
Got it. Well, that's true. And next up I have, it's an ad. He's dying to escape life, and it's a shot of him coming through the boom tube, again with that kind of distortion in the center. I like how you guys are really, it's kind of a limited palette for the most part on, depending on the scene, it's a lot of flat coloring, not a lot of like airbrushy effects unless there's a call for it. So
so like the one thing I wanted to do is kind of, it's like the fourth world, and Barda and Scott, is you're mixing the real world with this fantastic fourth world. Right. So anytime they're in costume or anything from the fourth world is going to be very bright, clean colors, and everything else might be a little dull, might be a little brought down a bit.
Right.
And Mr. Miracle, no matter what the situation, I try to keep him in his big green, big red, big yellows.
Yeah, I'm looking at a page. This is from the first issue where I think Scott is having a hallucination where Orion's come through the boom tube, and Orion's like in bright red, right? It's a pure red, pure blue, and Scott and Barda are, looks like there's kind of a mauve green tint kind of across all of it. They're lying in bed, and Orion says stand, and you see that color contrast between what comes from the fourth world and our world, I guess, right? I mean,
one of the cool things too of the night scenes is that everyone kind of has these blue faces, which at first you think it's obviously just because it's nighttime, so you're bringing the light down. There's also, I kind of wanted to layer in this other thing of Darkseid and his kind of grayish blue face, and Darkseid's presence is always in that book, no matter if he's in it or not.
Right.
I always want the reader to feel like there's this hand right behind him.
I don't know, I get that, right. So even Orion, so his costume is bright primary colors, but his face does have that kind of craggly Darkseid aspect to it. And then I just love the shots of Barda and Scott. I mean, they feel like kind of, I don't know, 70s, like illustration work, magazine illustration work and stuff like that. I mean, just really fantastic. So what's up with Darkseid is? Can you spoil that? Just Tom, if you're here, just tune out. Like, what does that refer to? Is it?
Yeah, so I think it's Tom can answer this better. It's a reference to the Morrison JLA. I think it's Rock of Ages.
Got it.
Where he comes out of the thing and the Darkseid is, and but it's more of this like. So in this book, we don't know what's real. We don't know
right.
if it's in his head. We don't know if Darkseid's pulling a string. We just don't know what is happening.
Right.
And who's controlling it or not controlling it. And so the Darkseid is just this way to stop the reader for a second and creep them out a little bit.
Right.
You can read. The best times we use it is during the normal happy times, and all of a sudden there's a black Darkseid is.
Right.
Just because, like I said before, I want the reader to be entertained and like the art and everything and enjoy the book, but at the same time I want them to feel like there's someone behind them at any moment.
Right.
Just this uneasiness, and I think that's what the Darkseid is panels do.
Well, it's definitely an intrusion. It's a visual intrusion, right? You're out of the story. You realize you're reading a black panel with text, and it almost feels multimedia in a way. So how happy were you when you got the script that said next page, full page splash, it's black, but Darkseid is like.
I was very happy.
Yeah.
I have a little marker board next to my desk with a countdown of 20 pages left, 10 pages left, pencils, inks, colors, how many days I've left, and knowing that essentially I started off with 21 instead of 22.
Right.
It felt like I got a free day.
Are you getting script for all the pages at once, or are you kind of getting scenes, or how's it?
Yeah. Again, I think one of the reasons Tom and I click is because I just don't know. I've never had a writer give me piecemeal before.
Right.
And so Tom always gives me a full script. And I love that because I get a full script with dialogue, which I get so wrapped up in the characters' heads that I want to know. I feel like even if there's a tone, depending on what that person is saying, could change the art dramatically.
Yeah.
So Tom gives me a full script so I can kind of plan things ahead. And, yeah.
No, I kind of knew the answer before I asked it because I think you are juxtaposing or hinting at elements that happen later visually, and if you're going to put in like Mr. Miracle posters in the background, or you're going to tweak like the image, you want to know if there's an opportunity to do that again later and use it to the fullest effect, and you're not going to do that unless you have access to the full story.
And that's come in really handy before, where Tom's well ahead, so I've gotten to read well ahead.
Right.
And, that's directly influenced things I'm doing 2 issues back from stuff I've read 2 issues forward.
Right. So there's like 3 issues in a row, and then you guys are going to have a break, a coda, or an intermission of some sort where...
So we're doing 6 issues.
6 issues, sorry.
And then between 6 and 7, there will be a month off. Purely because the nice folks at DC understand that I'm about to be a father for the
Yes,
first
congratulations, man. That's
time.
awesome.
Thank you. And so I understand that in order to keep that monthly deadline, I'm probably going to need a little buffer. So
Sure.
you guys.
Right, but I don't want to spoil it because it's a ways down the line. But that you guys are planning on having something that fits into the mythology you're creating, the storyline, and actually is kind of meta in that it draws from the material that you're creating in the book itself.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're technically taking a month off from the story,
Right.
but we're still giving you something in that month off.
Got it. Okay, we'll just leave on that tease there with that. But I'm showing just that it's this whole sequence where Orion comes and he's telling him stand, and it's almost like Scott Free has been so brainwashed or habituated or that he can't resist. In a way, like this is what, like you can see the young Scott Free kind of going through this crazy, ritual as a kid, like stand and they get swatted down, stand and get swatted down. It's part of the brutal
This whole
right?
military school thing of
Yeah.
like you do what you're told,
Regardless,
even though
yeah.
you know it's not going to be great. You just do it because that's how you've been trained.
Right. And then even just Big Barda and how even though she's super powerful, they almost have like a way of making each of the characters feel self-conscious, like because she would say stuff like "I'm too tall," and that's why would like you would never expect her to say something like that, and you can almost see that it's something they hardwired into her brain or kind of stuck in there when she was just a kid, and that's how they get at her sort of insecurity and kind of control her. I mean, it's
everyone has insecurities, no matter how badass you are, and Granny is great at finding those.
Right. So now I'm showing this really cool cover. Sorry, of I think it's issue 4. It's Scott with he's got a Batman shirt on, and there are all these cameras, and they're done in green ink. Kind of talk to me about like when you create an image like this. Do you start with this like an idea of how you want to balance realism and abstraction, or like how does something like this come about? Like you say, I'm going to draw this in a style that has no color, it's just graphical, and then I'm going to draw this in something that looks very representational. How does that?
Yeah. So one of my absolute all-time favorite illustrators is Austin Briggs, and he has a really unique line work where he'll do some finished paintings and stuff, but his sketches are amazing because they're just kind of loose and jumbly, but you get what they're going for. And that's kind of what I wanted to do, is do this kind of, it plays into the theme of the book again, where you have reality versus non-reality. And so to not actually color in the reporters or the paparazzi, to do it in a kind of jumbly style, and then all the viewfinders and all the cameras and stuff are reality again, but it's Scott in costume as Mr. Miracle, even though he's not in costume in foreground. So just trying to play all these different themes of the book in one image. And then I do have a running gag, as you'll see the book go on, is Scott Free loves wearing superhero t-shirts.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll get some more coming up too.
Okay,
but,
that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a wink to him realizing he is a superhero and he's made a living out of doing that, and he's a showman. Yeah. I mean, he's a celebrity. He's right.
He's a showman. He's a celebrity. He has a big history too of being in a lot of team up books in the past. So
yeah,
that was just kind of my little fun nod. So you'll see more of those.
And so the dry brush effect here, are you saying that's a customized brush in Photoshop that you use, or?
Yeah. So am I blanking on his name?
The guy you mentioned before.
Yeah. Kyle Webster.
Right.
He does Photoshop brushes, custom Photoshop brushes. He's got hundreds of them now. But that was kind of my thing of when I switched from traditional to digital, is I had the technology and the means for a good year before I did it.
Right.
Just because I wasn't comfortable yet. It didn't look like you said before, you could tell it was digital.
Right.
I didn't want that. And so I just kind of monkeyed with it. And once I discovered his brushes, where you can mimic all these different things, I think that one is called ink spat pen, so you get this kind of, if a pen had a little more leak to it.
Right.
And so you can kind of do all these fun different textures.
And then when you see the stuff printed, I mean, as you said you started out as a colorist, like how true to what you see in your head or on your screen it gets printed? I mean, like, as an artist, I'm very focused on the line work, but I recognize that even between issues, the coloring might vary between a book depending on whether it was first off the press or later. I mean, is that something that freaks you out, or is it
It does, especially on this book, and especially on Batman number 23, the Swamp Thing issue I did with Tom. I was doing a lot of new stuff, especially with a zipatone pattern and these things that I had no clue if it was going to print right or not, and the only way to find out is to do it. So I just did things as they looked good on the screen and then hoped for the best, and I think it really came out good. One of the things when you do a pattern, especially digitally, is you can sort of get these digital repetition, these moire patterns and stuff that are not pleasing to the eye. And I was very scared that's how it was going to print. Because sometimes even when you look at it on a screen, depending on how far you're zoomed in or not, you see them and you're like, ooh. And luckily they came out pretty good. So.
Yeah, actually I want to ask you, I don't work digitally, but the few times I've made corrections on my work, I'll pull in the black and white file and I'll see a face that kind of looks messed up, and I'll zoom in close because I can, and then I'll make all these refinements, and then I'll zoom back out to the published size, and I'll go like, I just wasted 3 hours, fine tuning this eyebrow that just completely closed up and looked.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That's a huge risk with digital, is that you can get too nitpicky and too in there. Nathan Fairbairn, a colorist and a good friend of mine, he always talked about when he first started coloring digitally, he was like taking forever to turn in a cover once. He's like, well, what's going on? Right. And he realized he was like spending an hour plus on putting like taste bud gradients on a tongue. He's like, this isn't going to show up. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And so that's something you have to watch out for sure. I try to not ever zoom in too much. Right. Because there's a lot of dangerous things that can happen. Also, if you get too detailed, too small, it just looks weird.
Yeah, it actually looks less real than something that's abstracted, where you just draw very quick shadows, and because it helps create that sense of scale. And when you can go in and zoom in on something really, I hear you, man. So it's amazing. Look, we're close to our end time, but I wanted to thank you for your time. I know that you have deadlines, although you just finished, right? I follow you on Twitter.
I have one panel left of inks, and then I got.
Oh, okay. I thought you were done. So I appreciate this even more, because I know when you get super close, you just want to finish at that point, So if
I'm racing the baby at this point.
Right, anyway. Exactly. So so on Twitter, you're at I think it's just at Mitch.
At Mitch Gerads, no space. Yep.
Same with Instagram.
Yep.
And I think the next issue comes out in 2 weeks, which is
the 13th.
The 13th, 9/13. So I just want to thank you for your time, and
thank you so much.
Yeah, we're going to record this, and
this has been awesome.
No, thank you, and we're going to put this up, and it will be a series of discussions, and maybe we'll check in with you later. But as the series progresses, but I actually have some. So the next one, I think we're going to have Sean Murphy. I asked him to be part of it, and so he's got this. I'm showing the cover to his Batman White Knight program book.
It's going to be so good.
Yeah, and so that's good. October 3rd. We're going to talk to him, and look, like I said, I know all you guys. I've met you socially in New York, and I follow you guys online. But it's, on one hand, we're interconnected in ways that we would never have been, or we never were earlier. But in some ways, we actually talk less. When I was first breaking the business, I got to know Rob Liefeld and Todd McFarlane and Mark Sylvester really well, because we couldn't text. The only way we could communicate was picking up the phone, and we would talk for hours while we were drawing. And so I just like the ability to talk to you guys sort of face to face, even if it's digitally and all that. So thank you again for your time, and congratulations on the book. The third issue sold better than the second issue, which sold better than the first issue. Dude, let me just say that never ever happens in the world of comic books, usually the trend is that way, and you guys are going the opposite way.
It's
So
super exciting. Tom just told me that today.
yeah,
Wild.
so kudos, congrats, and we'll talk soon. All right.
Right on. Thanks, Jim.
All right. Thank you. All right. Take care.
Bye.